What needs to stop being put on a pedestal? As someone with bipolar disorder, I really hate this because I'd do anything to be normal. This illness has destroyed my life and taken everything from me. And people make cute memes about mental illness like it's just some quirky thing everyone can relate to sometimes. I don't mean to gatekeep because it doesn't have to be a certain level of severity for you to suffer. This isn't the pain Olympics. But nobody should think there's anything desirable about having a mental illness. It's good to destigmatize it, but when you normalize it too much, it just loses its meaning. Edit: I should have specified that I don't have a problem with memes about mental illness in general. I love them. I only dislike the ones that make mental illness seem so relatable that it's no big deal, like it's some quirk everybody can relate to, as opposed to something that destroys lives. Because then, when your mental illness doesn't look quirky and cute, the stigma is still there. Also clarified what I meant about gatekeeping. TLDR, it's obviously unhealthy, but I do think some romanticization of mental illness by actual mentally ill people is a weird phase of acceptance. I know I went through that phase after inpatient stay because I was so relieved that my mental illness was being acknowledged. There was finally a diagnosis to put on this thing that was ruining my life. Treatment in the beginning takes a while since you have to try out different meds to see what works, start therapy, while dealing with the real world. Not to mention the 18-years-old brain is usually a mess anyway. I romanticized it because my mental illness seemed to consume and affect every part of me. I leaned to the diagnosis. It was an unhealthy coping mechanism for sure, but if I was my diagnosis then it wasn't my fault, my life was shit. Luckily I've gotten over that phase and just desperately want to be normal again, even though it's impossible. I'm learning to understand that, so learning to be healthy and stable regardless. There was something I saw about how TikTok is more toxic since a lot of embarrassing teenage and early 20s stuff has always happened, but now their face is attached to it and searching for clout. Unfortunately this includes PPL glorifying or faking mental illness, and it's fucked up. I feel sorry for pediatric psych, it sounds like a shit show. Having gone through 2 years of therapy for anxiety and depression, I am happy to see mental illness become less stigmatized. But having depression is not a flex or something cool. It fucking sucks, and when I was at my worst, I wouldn't have wished that on anyone. I also see people use their anxiety/depression as a crutch to avoid doing things that are hard. I get it, but you still have responsibilities and people still expect you to get things done at your job or school. My dad told me once that the world doesn't care and you have to learn to be better because of your depression. Best advice I ever got. Then I learned to rise above it, and I'm able to handle everything much better than just saying, oh well, I'm depressed so I can't do it. I'm a stronger person for having depression, but because I have to be so I can be the person/husband/father/friend I want to be. It is not harmless. I smoked weed for 9 years, and I used to smoke ungodly amounts of it, and I was pretty sure that it's the most beneficial and harmless thing in the world, and I would get offended when some womie would try to tell me that it's not always beneficial or even safe. One day, however, I ate the fattest, most packed brownie I have ever ate. It was all fun and games until I started to green out and get extremely nauseous, and it all descended into a huge panic attack, leaving me scared for my damn life. All that from a brownie, and by the time I had that brownie I would often get high until passing out in bed. It left me with severe emetophobia and random anxiety attacks. That was almost 2 years ago, and it only got worse with time. Be careful kids, it is a fun drug and it is nowhere near as dangerous as other drugs, but shit can happen. I had to give it up. This might be rude and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but recovering addicts. The amount of praise a recovering addict gets to me is insane, especially on the internet. I've known quite a few people and many of them were great people and many of them were terrible people. Most were very terrible while severely addicted, affecting everyone around them for years. I'm very happy for people when they recover, don't get me wrong. It's an amazing thing, but every time someone posts about it it's like Mother Teresa is the recovering addict. Praise from all around. Such an amazing person. Million upvotes. Meanwhile, normal people who are and have always been great people nobody cares the slightest about. I'm sorry, but if you were the worst human on earth doing terrible things for years to people because of your addictions and because of who you are as a person, you're not an amazing saint that needs to be praised because you're finally sober. The people that should be praised are the people whose lives were affected negatively for years trying to help these people and went through the worst of times because they were trying to be a good friend or parent, etc. The obesity of America. What you hear is not even true. America has been losing weight over the years. Our diet might not be healthiest compared to other counties, but a large majority of our country actually eats healthily. The price of a fast food burger being cheaper than multiple veggies at the grocery store does not help us though. For those who want to know why America got fat, it was because of the fat-free diet movement of the 1980s/90s. The worst case of misinformation and misunderstand of metabolism ever recorded in our country. We eliminated fat from our diet because we assumed fat is what, well, makes you fat. Which it does, but it's not the leading cause. Actually, starch is the #1 leading cause of weight gain. So we replaced all the fat in our foods with starch because the people were told it will help everyone lose weight and stay healthier. Companies saw tons of new opportunities to make new products: fat-free yogurt, fat-free muffins, fat-free cookies, fat-free anything you can think of. What ended up happening is almost all of the country gained massive amounts of weight very quickly. A lot of these people never worked out to begin with and stayed that size/liked the food they ate. We are still recovering from it to this day. Lesson: don't blindly trust any craze without understanding what it is doing to your body. About 70% of the diets/fads currently don't even work. Or work in complexity different ways than you might think. Like recently people started drinking ketones and cellulose to lose weight. People, WTF are you doing? Humans can't digest fiber, cellulose, all it does it make you feel full, fiber just makes you have some good bowel health. As for the ketones, all it is an energy boost and might actually increase your fat storage. Your brain runs off entirely sugar but only uses the ketones made by your liver. So even if you ingest synthetic ketones, all that happens is your body actually takes what is made by the liver and stores it in fat while the body itself starts to process the ones you ingested. Stop being a trend follower. Metabolism rant over. Someone like Jeff Bezos, he could have made a massive difference, if not solved, hunger in the world for the same price he spent on going to space for 10 minutes. At the end of the day it's his money and he can do what he wants with it, but if the question is solve world hunger or go to space for 10 minutes, I'm sure most people would solve world hunger. If he wanted to be remembered in history as being a good guy, he could have helped a large number of starving people. Instead he'll be remembered in history as the person who could have spent his privately earned money fixing world hunger, but instead spent it on going to space for 10 minutes. But he still has enough money to feed every malnourished person on this planet. That's an insane amount of money, and if you're reading this, Jeff, help humanity out bro, you're in a position where you can actually make a difference. Thumbs up. Worked graveyards as a valet at an ultra-luxury boutique hotel. It's quite shocking how some of these people live and you'd never have a clue by just looking at them on the street. One weekday night I was asked at 2 a.m. by a guest to bring around his Bentley. Regular looking dude came out with a backpack, got in and left. Not 30 minutes later the same dude pulls up in a Ferrari and now has a briefcase instead of backpack. Skip ahead an hour and the same guy orders 5 shot glasses to his room. I go up and it's 2 guys in robes and 2 naked ladies on the couch. They have lines of Coke and booze on the coffee table. They tip me $50 for the shot glasses and I leave. 2 hours later, just as the sun was rising, the 2 guys come out together in suits looking like they were heading to the office. The ladies left shortly after. Obviously drugs and escorts were nothing new, but the car swap middle of the night was a bit strange. When rich people want to buy a Jaguar in the UK, they get assigned a special salesperson who is incredibly knowledgeable. They meet in a special fancy office, and special arrangements can be made. This was my friend Chris' job. He had access to things that a normal Jaguar salesperson wouldn't have. Like he could ring up the manager of the factory for special requests level of access. Well, a Saudi prince wanted to buy this new Jaguar that had been released, so they met up and spent a full day speccing the Jaguar out. I believe the final price was something like 125k for the vehicle. Then came the decision for color. At the time the factory had 16 different color choices for this model. The prince asked if he could sleep on it as it was getting late and almost time for dinner/prayer. My friend Chris says of course, and they set a time to meet the new morning. The next morning the Saudi price is like, I figured out an acceptable solution to my color dilemma, to which Chris goes, and what would that be? The Saudi prince goes, I'll order one of each color. And my friend Chris is like, oh well, of course. They quote delivery time. Saudi prince was fine and asked for his options and was presented with ocean travel options, to which the prince said, what about air cargo? Chris, thinking maybe they'd do 1 or 2 by air cargo and the rest by boat, the prince was like, no, I want all 16 vehicles loaded on a plane, and flown to Saudi Arabia. So that's the story on how 16 of the same Jaguar with different colors ended up being flown to Saudi Arabia. All in, the total cost was around 2.5 million. Please note the prices should be pound, not dollar. Nothing too fancy, but I used to help build multimillion-dollar homes about a decade ago. One couple, neurosurgeon and dentist, had an office with one of those bookcase doors leading under the stairs. They stored their surround sound equipment and a safe in there. Another house had a very micromanager-esque woman as the owner along with her husband. She would regularly come to the site and order the workers around while the foreman sighed and rolled his eyes at her. At one point he had to order her off the site because she was being a safety hazard to his workers. I remember this couple also has a creepy setup for their kids, 2 bunk beds on either side of a wall for the kids, and both rooms led to a bathroom facing the road with a big bay window right next to the tub. So essentially, any person driving or walking past, or any neighbor could just look over and see these kids taking a bath. I've worked with some fairly wealthy people in the developing world. More or less new money, people who have been successful with some business venture or other. Overall, they're a bit out of touch with the realities of the world. I used to think that they were a bit naive too, because I saw a lot of other people taking advantage of them/outright robbing them. Over time, I realized while that's not untrue, it's more complicated. They did fail to notice a lot of uncollegiate activity on the part of the people they hired, but not all of it. What they did notice, they wrote off as the cost of finding people they could trust with projects that were actually important to them, and work with for years. So yeah, you could overbill them for a few $1,000 once or twice, but if you worked hard and produced results instead, you could bootstrap your whole business to the next level with just them as a client. Eventually, I realized they valued trust a lot more than they valued money. They made their money with fairly long-term, high-risk, high-reward ventures running in parallel, e.g. research. So it all makes a little more sense now. I know plenty of rich useless people too, but not very well. A lot of wealth is simply inherited in Asia. Cash flow is a really difficult thing here. Some people think they're important because they're born rich and act like fools. They do some pretty wild stuff, but I don't stick around to hear about it. I had a classmate whose father or mother was filthy rich from family money, can't remember. But they and he were amazing people. In uni, this girl in class who was really nice but also came from a poor family dropped her MacBook. She worked 60 hours a week for 3 months in the summer. He just came up, gave her his MacBook, and said he would just get a new one after school and his parents wouldn't care. Pure generosity. There was no TikTok movie or karma whoring going on. He was a stellar dude, spending his parents' money but only on stuff for other people and in a nice helpful way. He also gave all the guys in class a suit for graduation. Lots of the people were talking about renting one and stuff, and he told everybody he knew a place to rent real nice suits. We all went there and we all rented a suit for €100 or so, everything included, and when you went to return it we found out they were all paid for by this dude. He was like, renting a suit is stupid, but buying a suit is expensive. Now you got best of both worlds. Last thing I heard, he bought like 10 PS5 from scalpers and sold them for retail to kids in the neighborhood. Fuck, I should have stayed friends with him. Some kids have whole plans and strategies they practice to prevent being kidnapped or harmed by crazy stalkers. One kid I worked with was the kid of a big Hollywood player. And people would stalk the kid in an attempt to get to the parent. So this nutjob wielding a screenplay broke in and cornered the kid. Here I am thinking I am going to have to throw myself physically between them, but the kid dove into a nearby dog kennel and locked themselves in. He couldn't get out, but the nutjob couldn't get in either. So the nutjob just threw the screenplay at him into the kennel. Meanwhile I had called the cops. I was so impressed by the kid's quick thinking and asked how he got the idea. But he said that he always keeps an eye out for a way to escape. And when he sees someone he doesn't know approach, he gets ready to run. I felt awful that this kid had to live like that. If I hadn't seen it happen myself, I would have thought it was just paranoia. I worked for UPS for a hot minute as a driver helper and got to see some interesting things. The one driver had the rich of the rich route the mansions worth tens of millions around the Ann Arbor, MI area. The Ford mansion, Lloyd Carr, the one recent guy for Michigan football that I'm forgetting that also worked for Little Caesars. Edit, the name I was forgetting was Dave Brandon. Anyway, I got to see Dave Brandon's mansion. It was gated, deep in the woods, and absolutely huge. The driver, a 33-year UPS veteran, told me these guys with these huge mansions like this, they don't live there by themselves. Sometimes don't live there at all. They move their entire extended families in there. Parents, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. And they all live off the rich guy's dime, ordering whatever they want whenever they feel like it. I think we delivered 30 or 40 packages there that one day. Second story from the same day and with the same driver, we delivered to a smaller, but still huge, house with an extremely long and wooded driveway. The driver was cursing about how much he hated these people because they always parked this huge ass boat in the only possible turnaround point in the driveway. So he goes in backwards and floors it. Maybe 40 miles per hour backwards, about 250 yards of bends, straights, and he drove it absolutely perfectly, never driving off or missing the driveway. We get to the house and he needed a signature. He handed me the package and said he'll get the signature and just hand them the package and we'll go. Well, we get to the door, and this maybe late 40s or early 50s man, kind of a Rick Moranis / George Costanza type of build. Short, extremely thick glasses, balding, but very skinny build. He's standing in the front door with a lab-looking dog on a leash. The driver says, "Good evening, we just need a signature and we'll be on our way." I used to install DirecTV in wealthy areas of an East Coast city in the US. While I try to give customers options on where I install the satellite dish, I have to get a good line of sight for it to work properly, so sometimes the location options were limited. One rich lady's house, gorgeous house right on the beach, I only found 2 good spots for the dish. It could either be on a pole in the middle of her backyard, or on the corner of the roof. She definitely did not want it in the middle of her yard. Only problem was that she had a metal roof and we use specific mounting hardware for that. We happened to be backordered on that hardware for a few weeks out. When I informed her of this, she got visibly upset that she'd have to wait that long to get her cable up and going. I apologized many times and told her she'd need to reschedule a few weeks later and I leave. 3 days later I'm looking over my work orders for the day and I notice her name and address. I'm like, wow, I bet she thinks she's getting a different installer who she can try to convince to give her a different answer. I was wrong. I pull up to the house, brand new shingle roof. I did the install on the roof. As a chauffeur and ski companion for a mega rich guy's daughter, he sent me out to buy her a birthday present for when she turned 17, I think it was. This was way back in the 70s, so I got her a new BMW 2002, and told the dealer to charge it to the guy. Which was cool, and later the dealer offered me an absolute deal on a trade-in that was the usual cream puff only driven to church on Sundays. $500 for a really good late model used car, but an American car they never dealt in. Much later on, 30 years later, I was working with an architect building a home for another mega rich guy, and the library was to be paneled in knotty pine. Guy's wife arrived when it was almost completely trimmed out and says, "Too many knots." So we ripped out the whole interior, and the guy, who owned several sawmills, sent back to the mill to ship another truckload so we could select the boards under the wife's direction. And same wife, same building, could not figure out how to turn the car around in the triple wide driveway, so he had a turntable installed in the garage, so all she had to do was miss the edges of the door on the way in or out.